So I like this camera a lot. This is the LUMIX S5, and it is one of those cameras that is equally good for both professional photo and video work. Today we're gonna focus on the video side of things. I'm gonna walk you through some of my favorite features and how I set up my LUMIX S5 to get the most out of it. So first, let's talk about video recording formats on this camera. I'm shooting almost all of my content in 23:9:8, 10-bit 422. This camera is amazing because it does all of that internally as long as you set your record file format to MOV. What's good about 10-bit 422 video is it gives you that extra quality and control when you're editing. A common problem we see with 8-bit video is that it tends to band in areas that require smooth transitions of color, like a sunset, for example. Instead of that nice smooth gradient, you'll notice that the color jumps from one to another. This is because 8-bit 420 video is recording roughly 16 million colors, while 10-bit 422 is recording a little over a billion. So with all that extra information, those transitions of colors are much smoother, making for more professional video work. So now let's jump into picture profile. So on the LUMIX S5, I am only ever shooting in Vlog. Vlog is sort of like film. It's a digital negative where the information is captured on the sensor and the color is added in later in post. Vlog gives me more dynamic range and just way more options in post-production when I begin to grade. It can be a little tricky to expose, so LUMIX added in a Vlog View Assist, basically a Rec. 709 LUT that goes on your monitor. It's not baked into the footage, but it just helps you expose your image way more properly. To convert this Vlog footage to Rec. 709, I downloaded the nicest 709 LUT right off of Panasonic's website. This is my go-to LUT for all of my LUMIX cameras, and it just gives me a really nice starting point when I begin to grade. Now let's talk about exposure. So relying solely on your eye to expose your image can be tricky. Sometimes your shooting environment can be harsh and your eyes can play tricks on you. I've been on set so many times where I think my footage is looking great and then I plug my SD card into my computer and I can't believe how over or underexposed my image is. This is why I always like to use in-camera exposure tools like Zebras and Waveform so I can get consistent and repeatable results. If you don't know what waveform is, it's basically a graph that charts exposure from left to right. I mostly use this feature to check skin tones on subjects. Depending on the overall mood of the project, I like to keep the keylit part of my subject's face between 45 and 75 IRE. With our exposure looking good, let's make sure our subject is always in focus using focus peaking. I keep this feature on all the time when viewing the monitor. It basically outlines whatever is in focus in a color so that you know your image is sharp. Like I said before, your eye and your monitor can play tricks on you, so it's good to have things that provide hard evidence that you're getting the shot. And finally, shutter angle. So I'm sure you're familiar with the rule that you're supposed to double your shutter speed based off of your frame rate so you get nice cinematic motion blur. However, when you're on set, switching between 24, 60, and 120 frames per second, it can be pretty hectic and you may forget to double your shutter speed. With shutter angle, if you set it to 180 degrees, your shutter speed is automatically double your frame rate, so you do not have to worry about this. And those are some of my favorite video features that the LUMIX S5 offers. If you have any questions about anything I covered today, please leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to dive into it further.